Colleen, we currently have 3 online.
I think we have 7 here.
You've got 7 signed up, so you've
Yep.
got 4.
No, absolutely. If you're gonna grab a couple more, you'll need chairs.
He's gonna leave, though.
Yes.
You won't need one.
That's the first thing you learn is get out of town before they have a chance to get you.
Tim, I still maybe here when we're done.
Oh, honey, you know I can't do that. If I found out about that, I'd lose my job.
He's never offered to buy mine.
I'll take it if you want to. I think I did, didn't I?
You did, I think.
Okay, go ahead. Do we have enough for a quorum, Steve?
Yes, sir.
We
You
good?
got 10.
Okay, go ahead and call the first meeting to order. That would be, actually, it's the public forum. And Colleen, I just asked you if we've got any written correspondence or
Nothing.
anything else? No comments then from the public forum?
Nothing.
Well, that was a quick meeting then, right?
Get an adjournment.
Yeah, we'll just adjourn that meeting then. We'll go ahead and adjourn that. Go ahead and call the other meeting to order, which is the actual planning committee. First of all, I appreciate everybody coming. It's awesome to get a forum. I know a couple times in the past, some of y'all, I know Vance has been around, Doug's been around, some of these things, hard time getting a forum. It also helps, I guess, doing it online too, helps get the members out there. We appreciate you being a part of this process. And tonight we have some guests with us tonight. We got Kevin Cheek with SEB with Sherman Carter Barnhart. We got Tim Lucas with Ross Sinclair in Lincoln, down there in Lincoln Powder, was Ross Sinclair also. And we want to start with Ross Sinclair first.
Get your minutes.
Oh. We got approved the minutes from last meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Colleen, have you, I've not seen them.
Yes, you have them. Everybody's got the
Okay,
copy. I've set
they're
it up
online?
virtually in here.
Everybody have a chance to look at those? Need to look at them? We need to approve those? Can I get a motion to approve those?
Motion.
A second.
Who made the motion? I'm sorry.
Vance,
Second.
got a second somewhere, I saw it.
Who's finished? Got it.
Anybody opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, would we want to start with Ross Sinclair first?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and give the floor to Steve Lucas and Lincoln for Ross Sinclair.
Tim and Lincoln.
Would it be okay if I take my mask off while I
Yes,
chat?
sir.
Okay. Be careful. And a lot of people told me to put it back on. I'm Tim Lucas from RSA Advisors. Tonight we'll do this. Lincoln Fire. Lincoln is the only one that knows anything about finance. They brought me in because at one point I actually worked with the Department of Education, so don't hold that against me. Now you all watched the video last time?
No, well, they watched it, but I did talking.
He went through it.
Good. I was gonna say I've lost more than one LPC after that first video. KDE was pretty unhappy. They thought that they should have been up for an Emmy on that one, but just didn't happen. Well, this evening what we'd like to do is look at items that you're gonna be needing for background information as you put your plan together. And there'll be a lot of stuff that is specific to Lincoln County and to your schools. We'll talk about your schools just a little bit, but not nearly as much as Kevin will, because we don't know as much about them as Kevin does. Go ahead, first slide. This evening, we're going to give a quick overview of your existing buildings, and we'll look at your current plan and what it says about your district right now. And it's, as you go through there, the presentation ought to have the same slides as we've got here, but as much as we switch this stuff around, there may be something different. We're going to look at the projects that you've done since 2017, which is when the last plan was done. And then we're going to talk about funding. And the funding that comes to you to be put together by the Board of Education in projects as you move forward. And then, after that, doing that, we will also talk about your bonding potential, and we'll talk to you about how you borrow money, how you actually, the mechanism that you need to build schools. And I'll just talk a little bit, mostly Lincoln will talk to you about that. And then we're going to talk about the cost of delivery of services, how much it costs you all to operate each school per kid. So you can kind of see what goes on there. And then finally, we're going to talk about demographics at the end. We're going to talk about your enrollment history from 1990, and then we're going to look at a projection. And contrary to the manner in which the Department of Education is looking at it right now, you need to look at both of them, because a U of L projection that was done 10 years ago may not be as accurate as trying to glean from where you've been since 1990. Now, one of the first keys, one of those first concepts that you'll be looking at is when you're looking at your buildings, we're going to want to look at how many kids you're expecting in those buildings in your enrollment. And then we're going to want to compare that to the building's holding capacity. And the Department of Education sets up a formula for looking at the capacity of the building, and you look only at the standard classrooms. So for your elementary schools, you look at the standard classrooms, not special ed, not music, not art, none of that stuff, computer, just the standard classrooms. And depending upon the size of that classroom, they put a theoretical figure on the capacity of that room, okay? The smaller classrooms, 600 to 650, 20 kids per classroom. Once you get up to over 720, they look at 25 kids per classroom. You look at all of the classrooms within your building, number of kids that qualify, and that gives you the holding capacity of the building. So that's why it is incredibly important that your architect counts the classrooms correctly. And if you've got a classroom that is actually a music room, and you call it a classroom, it hurts you as you're looking for it, because the building has the appearance of being bigger than it really is. And then it gives the Department of Education a little bit of heartburn, and ultimately, when they got heartburn, you got heartburn. So that's just the way that goes. Now, for middle school and high schools, in recognition of the fact that there are so many other spaces that kids are in the high school and the middle school, and in addition to that, generally the kids are not in the same classroom every hour of every day, much like in elementary. So in that case, they assume, the department assumes that 25% of the time, kids are going to be in spaces other than a standard classroom, because you've got so many more of them. You've got more science rooms, more special ed, more PE, all kinds of spaces. So what they do there is, again, they start with a base calculation, very similar to elementary school, smaller classrooms, 563 to 650. You start out with a base of 21 kids, up to over 720, 25, but then you divide that by 75%. So in looking at that, it gives you a theoretical capacity of your smaller classrooms, bounce it up to about 28, and your bigger classrooms, it bounces up to 33.3. Now, that is not to give the impression that you're going to put 33 kids in that classroom. It is a theoretical space that allows you to look at your building. You've done these so much, you can do it without me. We're going to look right now at the current district facility plan. Now, you're putting together a notebook that will have all kinds of information. It'll have PowerPoints that are presented in your agendas, but it will break itself down to about your facility plan being about a 3 or 4 page document that is very standardized in the manner in which the Department of Education does it. you're gonna be looking, the first part of the preamble includes a quick overview of your school district. Tells when the plan was done, your school district. Then it has all of your buildings, has your organization, of how you got your classroom or your classes set up within buildings. And then it looks at all of your buildings, whether they're a building that's going to continue to be in use, or it's one that you're going to replace. It will have indicate what grades are served in that building, and then it will show the previous building enrollment versus the capacity as it was figured the last time you did it, okay? This is your current plan, originally done in 2017. You guys are about the only district I've seen that is going to come near the renewal date that was on the plan. It's difficult to get the people together and to kind of hit those dates. But if you look at it real quick, in this case, your current organization is PS 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. The long-range plan that was discussed at this time was a PS 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12. If you go down and look at the buildings, you're looking at the high school. There's a permanent 912 center, 1,050 kids with a capacity of 974. Bingo, it tells you real quick, you need some classrooms. You know, so those are the kind of things that hit you right quick. As you go on down, in this case, your Fort Logan Alternative School is a transitional center, which means that your intention as a district is to take that building out of service and either replace it or put the kids elsewhere. And by having a transitional rating on it, you can't spend any restricted money on it. You know, you can spend general fund money to handle life safety stuff, but it's a building that you're not intending to put money into, okay? You go on down to your middle schools. In this case, you've got 178 middle school, and then the McGuffey Center, which was a 6th grade center. And in those cases, the biggest challenge you're looking at here, your McGuffey Center is 293 kids with a capacity of almost double that. We'll see how that plays itself out in your cost of delivery of services, and we'll talk about that. And then you've got lots of elementary schools, 6 elementary schools, and in this case, it shows that they're all PS 5. And as you look through that, you can really quickly go down and see the sizes, number of kids in them, and their capacity, and kind of get a feel for where they are one building to the next. Okay, now, the facility plan does 2 primary things. It lays a ground plan of action for your Board of Education to spend facility monies, okay? But the other thing that it does, it is the determining factor for one of the funding sources that comes to you. So you don't want to gild the lily, but you want to make yourself eligible for every dollar that you can as part of this. Well, it breaks itself up into 5 priorities, but only the first 4 priorities are used to determine the district's need. The first 2 priorities are primarily school buildings, and priority 1 and priority 2 have the same steps. Priority 1 are the things that you anticipate doing in the next biennium after the plan. Priority 2 are the school things you're doing after the first biennium, okay? Priority 3 we'll see, but in this case you have no priority 1s. And priority 1 projects on the next slide, pop that up. You do have priority 1s. Sometimes we put them on too, but you'll see in this very quickly priority 1C, which is major renovations. You don't have an A or a B, which are new buildings. So in this case, you've got a middle school with a major renovation of $12 million, and then you've got these classrooms and special ed rooms and things that you qualify for by your architect looking at the inventory of your spaces compared to the model program. And where you fall short of the model program, you qualify for these additions. So that's where your architect is real critical in that. You're looking at the high school, about a $23 million renovation. Woo! And you've got Stanford Elementary here, again, a small renovation, it's primarily roof at about $500,000, and expanding the cafeteria. Now, under priority 2, again, are the things that you hope to do after the first biennium. Here you've got crab orchard, roof replacement, and then you've got Highland Elementary, again, major renovation of about $3.5 million. In this case, you've got boys and girls restrooms. I'm surprised Kentucky Department of Education let that be on there. Generally, you only put program spaces on there, and then things like bathrooms are picked up in the net to gross conversion, which picks up walls and corridors and bathrooms and mechanical rooms. In this case also, you've got about $8.5 million in renovation to Houstonville and additions on that building. McKinney, again, $2.5 million renovation, additions there. Waynesburg, almost $4.5 million in renovation. And the reason that you've got these in 2 different renovation descriptions, one of them are the things that the building qualifies for after 30 years. And in this case, you've got a 1999 portion of it that was not 30 years old, but it still qualifies for it under a 15-year renovation, and that's where you get a lot of that. So in this case, you've got additions, you've got renovations. Whoa. Boom. And then you go to priority 3. You all don't have any priority 3 projects. Priority 3 are for school building additions where you don't have any renovations, such as if you built an elementary school and you didn't have enough money to put a gym on it when you built it, so you built it without a gym, not in Kentucky, but if you did, and you put in a gym and cafetorium, well, they don't work very well for any of those, and you still qualify for a gymnasium. So you put that under priority 3. In addition to that, priority 4 are administrative type buildings that don't carry the same weight as priority 1s through 3. And in this case, those are for things like bus garages and central offices and storage buildings and those things. And in this case, you're looking at a almost $3 million renovation of your central office and student area. Which gives you a total of $73 million of work that you would qualify for. And those are 2017 dollars, okay? So this is the number that will be evaluated. The reason we're going for June, any odd year, the Department of Education freezes every facility plan that is in place at that time. They then take those plans, they look at your district need established on the plan. If it's an older plan, they update your costs based upon inflation factors that they put into it. And then they subtract the work that you have done since the last plan. So then, instead of your need, it becomes the district unmet need. The need that is not met, they also take away your bonding potential, is not met by any other fund. So that's why it's real critical to make sure that you include all of the items that you qualify for. Next one. Now, this is priority 5, which is discretionary. This is the area that every school district likes, and everybody in the Department of Education hates. Because on priority 5, or discretionary projects, they do not count towards your district need, and you cannot spend restricted monies on them. But that's where you put things like your athletic field houses. If you decide that you want 2 auditoriums in a building, you only qualify for 1, so your second one can go right there in case, you've got Bill Gates that moves into the community and wants to donate one. It's all right there. So in this case, you've got about $1 million in athletic stuff, and quite frankly, those appear to be quite modest. In most cases, that's where you put your synthetic turf. And that's about $1.5 million item. And
Bill Gates moved into the neighboring counties.
what's that? Yeah. Well, but I can tell you what, I was involved with all of those, and man, that's a battle. It is a real battle, trying to come up with the money for that. And it's amazing how they can do that. Now, some of the districts, you got district like Boyle County, well, they got theirs when a former superintendent became very rich and donated it to them, okay? But in a lot of cases, what you're finding, particularly on synthetic turf, is that it is a very versatile sports surface if you can also use it for PE, but there are very few coaches that will let PE people be on their turf field. So it can be a very divisive issue, but that's where it would go, okay? These are the projects that you've undertaken since the last plan was done, and as you can see, it's nothing really major. It's kind of like the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dam. You're trying to pick up pieces, canopy, roof, fence replacement, re-roof, security upgrades. The kind of things that will allow you to save up some of your restricted money, but still keep things going forward, okay? Now, I like to goof on the General Assembly, but I can tell you, the General Assembly has put together what I think, and I had the good fortune to be with the Department of Education and look at a lot of vehicles of funding schools in other states. And I tell you what, I don't think there's one that is better than what our General Assembly has set up. They set up what we call, and we'll see this, the three-legged stool supporting your schools. We've got, based upon 3 different things that allow you to have money every year based upon things that are different. You've got it based upon your student population, based upon your property assessment, and which is your relative wealth of your district, and then based upon your qualified needs. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Tim, could we back up that last slide?
Sure. Go back.
This is a question, I guess, more so for Darren. Those 5 projects that obviously I know limited funds, how did you guys go about selecting the 5 projects? Was that just
Money that we had some leftover, we had some SFCC funds that were about to expire. And when we looked at how much money we had and things that needed to be done, that's where the roofing projects fit in. Obviously, that's the only thing we really could afford at that time that needed to be done.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It was use it or lose it money, I couldn't remember what it was called.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's SFCC. And I can tell you, as an architect in a former life, roofs aren't glamorous, but I can tell you, if your building's leaking, most everything else sucks, And the thing of it is, architects love roofs. You don't have to give all your money to engineers, and you don't have to ask everybody in the county what color to make it. It's pretty good. I couldn't make my wife understand that, why I love roofing jobs. Next, please. And generally, you're in and out before they have a chance to get mad at you. Next, please. Now, the two funds that we're gonna talk about here, again, the student population-based funds are based on your average daily attendance. And the cost hasn't changed, what, in that 30 years? $100 per kid per year. And of those funds, you get those every year. And you can use 80% of them to borrow money or bond to build schools. The second fund is based upon your property assessment, and that's called the local nickel. You've probably heard of that. You take all of your property assessed funds, all your property assessments, divide it by 100 and multiply it by 5 cents, thus the nickel. And in addition to that, in recognition of the fact that an acre of land in Boone County may be worth a whole lot more than an acre of land in Owsley County, they look at the assessment per pupil, and if you are below the state average, the General Assembly makes that difference up at 150%. It's called equalization. And in some cases, you know, like a district like Owsley County, for every dollar they raise locally, they get $3 from the state. And we'll see where you all run into that next, please. In this case here, this is based upon the SEEK calculations, and you can see very quickly your average daily attendance in the 21 forecast. In this case, your ADA, a little over 3,000, okay? And with that, 80% of that, $100 times that, and 80% of it you can use for bonding. In this case too, your assessment of all the property that you have is a little over $1 billion per pupil. That's almost $400,000. Now here you've got your nickel based upon that, your local nickel generated by your property assessment is about $640,000. The state then pays you about $830,000. So you get more from the state than you raise locally, okay? Next one. Now the qualified needs-based funding is the one that is dependent upon your district facility plan. And those are monies that are given to you, again, the Kentucky School Facilities Construction Commission, the SFCC, okay? Now, again, what they do is on the odd year in June, they freeze the plans, and in this case, if you don't get the plan done by June, they'll use your last plan and update your cost. And in looking at that, again, $73 million, and of that, this totals about $20,000 per student. I guess they're using that to make somebody mad, but quite frankly, this just tells you what you're looking at, and that's your need. Next one. Okay, now all of these fundings have to be put together to determine how much money you've got to build schools, okay? This is a little chart that very quickly shows you with your ADA and all that. In this case, you have got, from your 3,200 kids, you've got a capital outlay of $320. Now, being from Boone County, I could figure that real quick, you know. 10% is always easy for me to do that, or 100. Your nickel, again, gives you about $340,000. Your equalization gives you about $827. So you add those up and you get $1.7 million. And you're saying to yourselves, oh, that's not much money. That is $1.7 million a year based on things that aren't going to change a great deal. So think of it like your house. Once you look at everything, you go to the banker, You wanna build, you ask the banker will say, well, how much money have you got coming in per year? That's that. You call Lincoln, Lincoln takes a look at it, he analyzes all of the bond rates and everything, and from that, he generates your potential to bond for schools. That's what we do. Next please. Now, this is a slide that the Department of Education puts together to try to see if they can get your board members and your superintendent fired, okay? This is what would happen if the district raised a second nickel. And in this case, if it was equalized, you're looking at it, and instead of a 1.7, you add the second nickel, and then all of a sudden you're at 2.3. I like to goof on that one because when I actually generated that, I didn't realize how much the superintendents and the board members hated that slide. But I'm realizing it now.
You missing a slide?
I'm missing one slide. I'll tell you what, once you go back. Lincoln, can you jump up, I thought those slides were in here.
Okay, they've already got it.
Okay,
I had copies just in case.
okay, why don't you jump up and
Sure.
jump in there, and then I'll finish it up.
Sir, thanks for having me tonight. I'm going to go ahead and apologize. I'm not nearly as entertaining as Tim, but my goal tonight is to jump deep into the finances and simplify it as much as possible so that you guys feel a lot more comfortable about how a bond issue, where we arrive at your bonding capacity, and it really is, at the end of the day, not much more complicated than walking into your local bank to take out a mortgage for your home. Your home mortgage typically is going to be issued for a 30-year period. In the school world, school bonds are issued and paid over a 20-year period. So you walk through the doors of your local bank, as Tim said, you sit down with your loan officer. The first question, Tim pointed out the revenue streams, and we'll go over that in just a second, but on page 1 of the handout, your loan officer is going to want to know what your current debts are. And if you look at each column, A through G, each column represents the sum of the principal plus interest payments on existing bond issues that are already on the books. I always point out, as part of our ongoing service to your district, we're always watching all these bonds for the potential to refinance and save some money. I know the last couple of weeks rates have kind of started to spike up just a little bit. But if we jump all the way to column H on the far right-hand side, you'll see that for approximately the next 10 to 12 years, the sum each fiscal year of your existing bond payments are approximately $1,500,000. Big number on the surface, until I kind of double back and go over those numbers that Tim just spoke of on page 2. So how are we going to pay? We know we're obligated for the next 10 or 12 years at 1.5 per year. How are we going to pay for that? Not only how are we going to pay for that, how much do we have left over that we could consider another project? Column B, I'm going to be real quick, is your local nickel. Again, that 5 cents per $100 of assessed property value generates $639,000. Also, throughout my presentation, I want to point out different ways that I've been conservative because, again, if you did issue bonds to finance a project, you would be locking in that payment for a 20-year period. And so what happens if ADA continues to decline? Column D, your capital outlay, as Tim pointed out, $100 per unit of average daily attendance. The Department of Education actually puts guardrails themselves on us. That's their one way of being conservative by telling us that we can only use 80% of this capital outlay number for bond projection purposes. And so that number is $256,214 of revenue. The nickel equalization, $827,000 shown in column E. Column G is where Tim was getting the sum every year of $1,720,000 of revenue. Now, in addition to those revenue sources, well, let me back in column H, I just subtract out the amounts that are already on the books. and I'm left with column I. You'll see in column I, this would be the positive amounts that are left over each year that you could, you're telling your loan officer, I've got this revenue stream over the next 20 years that I could apply towards payments on a future bond issue. Well, in addition to the positive amounts shown in column I, columns J, K, L, and M, those all represent offers of assistance from that School Facilities Construction Commission. And again, to reiterate what Tim was pointing out, the offers of assistance that come to you from the School Facilities Construction Commission are handed out basically on a pro rata basis, based upon that amount of unmet need on your plan. So the larger the unmet need, the General Assembly literally allocates a pot of money to the SFCC to hand out. Most importantly of these four columns, column J, in column J, the SFCC has said we will pay $29,279 every year for 20 years on a bond issue, but that bond issue has to be issued within an 8-year period. It's called the 2012 SFCC offer. It actually wasn't available until 2014. 8 years from 2014 puts us right here. So this offer has to be issued, or has to be applied to a bond issue that's issued before January of this coming year. That $29,000 will bond approximately $350,000, as we'll see here in a second. So get sidetracked a little bit by pointing out the urgency of using, and circling back to the question on how the projects came. A couple years ago, we were in the same situation with an older SFCC offer, the 2010, where it was, again, same situation, use it or lose it. The bonds had to be issued by January of that year, and that was where we kind of had to fight with KDE, because typically these SFCC dollars can be used on either a priority 1 or a priority 2 project. At that particular time, and depending on the mood at KDE, I think now they're still saying those SFCC dollars have to be used on an actual priority 1 project. But we'll circle back to all that. Far right-hand column N. That's the grand total of all your net revenue positive that's available at the end of the day for bond payments. So first 10 years, you're looking at roughly $350,000 that you can apply towards bond payments. And then as existing bonds start to become paid off after 10, 12 years, as you look down farther in the column N, you'll see you've got much larger dollar amounts that could be available to make bond payments.
So Lincoln, that 1.125 came from the SFCC money,
I do believe
not out
that,
of general fund, correct?
definitely not out of general, we did,
See it? Because we didn't have it, so it had to come out of that fund, because you said it was.
I know it was a
Use it
big,
or lose it money.
it
So
was
had
use
to
it or
come out
lose
of
it, and
that
it was a
fund,
big process, and we had to do a finding to move it from priority 2 back up to priority 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I'm pretty sure it's 100% SFCC.
Yeah, we
It
didn't touch it.
I thought so. That's.
Wouldn't have been
I'm
general.
just clarifying.
So what all that means in column N, what will that do for you? If you'll turn to page 3, column C, I have kind of modeled a hypothetical. If you had a project shovel-ready today, you could issue at the bottom of column C $6,100,000. This would be the principal amount on the bond issue. Column D, the interest rate. I'm standing here today talking about a project that's hypothetical first, but even if you were ready to start working on a project, it could be a year or more before it was designed and ready to issue bonds. And so I've been very conservative in my interest rate projection in column D, because none of us have any clue what rates are going to be a year from now. I wouldn't want to be in a situation where your architect did all the work and then all of a sudden rates came up and you owe him a pile and sorry, we don't have the bonding capacity anymore. So these rates are very high compared to today's rates.
Then is it safe to say without that local nickel that go through this plan again like we did 2 years ago, without the SFCC money, we would have been working on with zero, correct? Because,
So I'm obligated to talk about what the additional nickel would do, and
yeah, I guess that's my point. Without the nickel last time, the 1.1 basically came from SFCC money. We wouldn't have been able to do any of the projects without the SFCC money, correct?
yeah, let's
What
back.
that we did,
No,
I mean,
I'm saying we wouldn't have been, without the SFCC money, we wouldn't have been able even to do the 1.1 million worth of projects.
Let me back up to page 2, and I'll show you exactly how that was. That is correct at the time. So if you'll turn back to page 2, column E. Your bonding was very restricted
yeah,
at that.
yeah, that's,
And-
I think that paints a clear picture of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Is-
and I'm gonna show you how it's increased since then. On page 2, column E, that equalization mechanism, every 2 years. That's why even if your bonding potential is 0, there's always hope, because every 2 years you're gonna get an additional offer from the SFCC. And every 2 years, for the last 30 years, we've seen an increase in that equalization formula. And if you look in the row fiscal year 20, that column E equalization generated 722,000. Available this fiscal year, that jumped up to 827,000. So that increase in funding from the equalization contributed in large part to how you went from being very restricted then to having 6 million bond capacity today. I'm gonna jump all over the place. Of that 6 million that you've got today, if you'll turn to page 4, inside the box, you'll see, I don't have them summed up, but the 2012 offer of assistance provides 390,000 of that 6.1. And then you'll see your 2014 offer generates 670,000 of the 6.1. So that 6.1 includes not only your local revenues, but just eyeballing it, 1.5, 2, so some of those 4 numbers there from SFCC would be paid directly from SFCC. So at any time, if you wanted to do a bond issue that was 100% paid by the state, you never wrote a check, you could, if anybody wanted to do that math for me, you could issue that, some of those 4 numbers.
Somewhere around
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Back to page 3, column K. So on page 3, column K, this shows the revenue that would be left over if you moved forward immediately with that hypothetical 6.1 million. Okay, so I'm standing here telling you your maximum bonding capacity is 6.1. Well, then in column K, why am I showing that there's, at the bottom of column K, there's $12 million left? The reason for that, the upper portion of column K, over the next 10 years or so, I've been conservative and held out $60,000 approximately, just in case ADA declines, and a lot of your funding is driven by ADA. So imagine those first 10 years that show 60,000 being left over. Let's imagine that as 0, because the trend in ADA has been down. If those numbers in column K in the first 10 years, after we issue 6 million, were 0, that causes us a problem, because even down in years 14 through 20, when we have those big numbers, 1.3 million a year, we can't access them because there wouldn't be enough money in the early years even to pay interest only and no principal to access the lower years. Now, how we would remedy that, and I'm going to speak only very briefly on it. Anything when it comes to tax increases, I try to limit my speaking to that, but page 4, the footnotes on the bottom, if you were to successfully add an additional local nickel, not only would you have the benefit immediately of that revenue from that tax collected, but that tax would allow you to access those big dollar amounts at the bottom of column K on page 3. You know, that's revenue. Those $1.3 million amounts at the bottom of K on page 3, those are revenue amounts that are out there right now that could be used on a bond issue, except for the fact that there's not enough interest in the early years to be able to issue those bonds that would mature 10, 15 years out.
So Lincoln, if I read this correctly, if we were able to pass a additional nickel, that would generate 10 million locally.
Yep.
Then the state would give us $12 million on top of that.
Yeah, and some of that is because of the leverage that's available there by being able to access those $1.3 million.
And that's on top of the 6.1 million
Yes.
we have. So
Yep.
basically, we're looking at, that's 28 million?
Very comfortably, if both the nickel tax was successful and, again, the equalization, every district to this point that has levied a recallable nickel has had it equalized. So if that was to happen, you could potentially be looking at a $28 million project. I know that was all over the place and a lot of numbers, kind of quick. Questions? Again, the the $390,000 minimum project needs to be moved forward as really, honestly, as quick as possible to utilize that one, the oldest SFCC. No questions? Thank you, guys. I'm always available. If there are anything that come up throughout the process, just shoot them my way.
Guys, one thing I would like you to take away from that presentation, not necessarily just the numbers. I can't tell you, we do a lot of these. And the most frustrating thing is to get to that part and come to the bottom line, and you've got a table full of people that are ready to go, and you get a big goose egg, because they ain't got any money. And you see everybody in the room going, what in the world are we doing here? Most of them don't say a word. And beyond that, you guys are playing for keeps, not funsies. You got $6 million comfortably to be able to spend. And as you move forward, that's going to increase, okay? You may not have the ability to come and raise taxes, but as Lincoln said, just by the change in the formulas that happens, you guys have got money. So that's a good feeling, okay? Well, now, one of the most interesting things that is on the KBE website are their student report cards, school report cards. And basically, they look at everything at each one of your schools. It's really a nice document that was put together, not by facilities, it was supplied by the group. But in these, they look at every dollar that you spend in the school, and then divide that by the kids there to give you the cost per student to operate that building. And there's a lot of things that go into that. The thermal envelope and energy use of the building. If you've got an old building that you're throwing dollars out the window, it costs more to operate it, okay? Your enrollment versus your capacity. If your building is only half occupied, you've got twice as much building you're having to deal with, okay? The age of your teaching staff. My whole family, other than me, who is the black sheep of the family, were all teachers in Kentucky schools, except my little brother who went to Fargo. Said he lives in Fargo. I said, son, that's an oxymoron, okay? But basically, in looking at that, generally, your younger teachers don't get paid as much as your older teachers, okay? The number of free and reduced lunch students that you serve in a school with very little, they spend less money with that. And then also the grades level served. In most cases, your high school and middle schools cost less to operate than your elementaries because of the sizes and all that stuff. In this case, in looking at your schools, right now, you operate your schools, all of them, at an average of about $12,700 a kid. That is about 13% below the state average. So I knew when I drove into Stanford, I heard this screaming. Basically, I think it was George Washington having his head squeezed in that quarter, because that's what you guys are doing. You guys are spending less than the state average. So when you look at this, you're spending $11,000 roughly at the high school, $11,000 at the middle school. And in that, if you look real quick, well, you've got less building than students. So in that case, you're at 113%. Where's the principal of this school, of the high school? How in the world do you operate a school that you don't have enough room to put your kids? That's a challenge. And looking at this again, your middle school, 114%. But then once you get down to your elementary schools, McGuffey, apparently they put that dollar figure into combining both schools. Now, if you look here at your elementary schools, the only school that you've got that is pretty near an operating, kind of even operating capacity is Highland at 85%. Everything else, 64% at Crab Orchard, 60%, and in this McKinney Elementary, what?
It's currently closed.
Okay.
KD's asked us to leave it in there pending
Okay.
litigation.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how they're spending $14,000 at McKinney, and you ain't got any kids there, but that's, yeah. But in looking at that real quickly, you guys are fairly close. Your one school, Highland Elementary School, have got, fewer kids, but it's, a better capacity, $13,000, and that's only about $600 higher than your other schools. So, you guys have got pretty good equity across the line. I do this at Fayette County's not, but Jefferson County, they've got like 75 elementary schools. They've got some that they're spending, $20,000 a kid, and others that they're only spending $5,000. And if I had a kid that was into $5,000, I'd want to know, well, how come my kid doesn't get all this? Because they have a great inequity in how they're dealing with their kids. But in this case, what we'd like to see, are there things that we can do that will make it easier to make these numbers closer? Well, probably you would do better if every school was occupied at 85%. But I'd be doing better if I was 6'4" with her too, so that's the way that goes. Next. Since 1990, we've looked at your enrollments here in Lincoln County, and you have lost, since 1990, you've lost about 7% of your kids, okay? And in this, if you go across 1990, you lost about 2.5%, 3-year total about 4.5%, 7% in 5 years, and 13% in 10 years. You've got a challenge with your school district here with the number of kids that you're losing every year. And that's not just your challenge. That's a challenge everywhere in the state of Kentucky. And particularly the further east you go or the further west you go. Really the only districts that are doing pretty well are the big school districts. Jefferson County, Boone County, Kenton County, Campbell County, Warren County, Owensboro in that area. But outside there, in western Kentucky, it is almost as bad as in some of the schools in eastern Kentucky. Now, if you look at the projections provided by the University of Louisville, in this case, if you look at your school age projections, you're looking at, over the next 20 years, you're projected to also lose an additional 10% of your kids. Your working class projection, losing about 9% of your people in your working class age demographic, and for your older generation, your retirement people, they're going to increase 31%. So you've got some things that you're going to have to think about of how you're gonna operate and to be able to accommodate what you're doing with this. Next, please. Again, this is wrong. That says over 40% of the school districts in the Commonwealth are declining. That's 60% right now. I did those numbers. I did that number 8 years ago. They haven't changed it yet. But in this case, as you go through this, again, you've got a 9% decline in enrollment over the next 20 years. Here, we talk about the decrease in your working class population, and as you go down, again, student age 10% less. Greater numbers increase in your older generation. What that means is you're gonna have people that are putting money into your taxes leaving. But you're gonna have an older group that may not have as much investment in your school district that are gonna be wondering, why should I continue to support it? My grandkids maybe go there, but not my kids anymore. Except in Boone County, we're 35-year-old first graders. But other than that, it's pretty good. How are you gonna wisely assess your assets to be able to leverage and generate your school district and to operate it? Well, you're gonna do the things that you've done forever. You're gonna work together as a team with your design professionals, your superintendent, your board, your community, and you're gonna look at ways to invest people into your community. But the main thing that you're gonna do is to continue to educate kids in Lincoln County that everybody, regardless of their age, will be happy to support. I don't know what you're expecting, but as Porky Pig would say, that's all, folks. Thank you again for letting us come here. And any questions you've got, go through the superintendent or the chairman of this committee, and if they don't have the questions, they can contact us. And we'll try to get the answers for you and come as close as we can. Are there any questions on this part? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Don't get it, Tyler.
All right, appreciate it. Okay, I'm Kevin Cheek, I'm with Sherman Carter Barnard Architects. To kind of give you an idea of what we do, KD requires that all your facilities be reviewed by a design team of engineers and architects. We've had our teams go through the buildings, we've looked at every single building, walked in every classroom, so the teachers may remember some folks walking around. What has changed from and Tim's gone now, if I can say that without him getting mad at me, but what has changed recently that the old days didn't have. In the old days, when we first started doing this, we had forms we filled out, and we checked the boxes, and we looked at everything. And KDE has now automated that process, which required us to go back and redo and be much more extensive in the data. Everything's being data-driven now through the KFIX program. It's basically an automated program that will update automatically every time a project is done. It assesses the buildings, and then it automates it so that as things are addressed in an LPC, into a DFP, and then worked out as a BG1, it will eventually all be integrated so that there will not be a whole lot of opportunity to have arbitrary or unvalidated needs in your SFCC DFP report, okay? Now what that means is the local boards will still have the ability to pick what projects they're going to do. There will still be things that you all are allowed to do that are sort of the organization of it and the priorities. But what they're doing is they're really getting a lot of this automated. So the purpose of this was to allow the legislators at any moment that the funding changes at Frankfurt, the legislators can get an instantaneous, updated assessment of where all the buildings are. What they've been doing since this has come out, we may all remember the categories, 1 through 5, those are gone now. We used to have a Parsons report that came after it, which prioritized urgent needs. so that the legislators, if there was an excess money that they could spend, they could do it as an urgent needs project, but they gave it out based upon where you ranked in this system. K-Fix now is doing that automatically. It's spitting out this list of where the worst schools are that have the most needs, the most district needs, and so forth. But there's just no money to give out that urgent needs. You just don't see that like we
I
once
have a
did.
question with that.
Yeah.
Does the state legislature have to follow K-Fix, or can they still do as they've done in the past and kind of pick and choose?
They can, and I was getting ready, I'm glad you said, that's a good segue. What we have seen is that the legislators are now not only looking at the need, but they're also looking at what they like to call the local contribution, or the local participation, or the local buy-in, the support that the local community, the local taxpayers have. And the way they're assessing that is they're saying, okay, you passed one nickel, but we've got districts over here that have passed 2, 3, 4 nickels, whatever their nickels are. And since they've got a strong base, they're using a lot of their own money, we're going to support them when we decide to equalize or give other money out for urgent needs. A few years back, Corbin and Boyd County were way down on the list. And there was some money that was going to be given out by urgent needs, and there were folks that were, number one, you know, when urgent needs comes out, we've got it, we're going to get it. And literally, those folks had never passed any additional nickels, ended up going down the list, and the districts that suddenly had nickel contributions, and their scores were so low on the K-Fix, they were the worst schools, and their reports at that time, they moved to the top, and they got the funding, and the others didn't. That's how Boyd County got basically a new middle school, and Corbin got a new middle school. And there were some other districts out there that got it too. But that's just the way the legislators don't know how long it's going to last. You never know what they're going to use, and that's why they're in the legislation. You know, they can do that.
But I mean, Superintendent Rowe, don't they make that pretty clear, right? That you gotta have skin in the game or they're not gonna participate pretty much.
That's, yes, and I spoke to our local senator and representative, and that's exactly what they said, yes.
So that's how those needs, what you're seeing in your old DFP of the 73 million, I want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's important. I'm going to give you a copy of this 4-year summary, and it's a lot of information, but I'm going to give that to Darren, and Darren can get copies out, or we can email it out to the committee members. But it's very, very detailed. And when you get into it, it lists everything, and I can kind of show you here, just kind of walk you through some of this. But for instance, this is at Crab Orchard Elementary. So these are the things KDE has told us as the design professionals that we have to show you is that 4-year plan. So you get a 4-year need. It doesn't go into the full next 20 years. It only goes in for the 4 years. So at Crab Orchard, for instance, you can see here, and I'm just going to pick one, exterior door, hollow mill doors. Exceeded the replacement time. Doors are in fair condition. However, they have reached their replacement cycle. The age of those doors and so forth can be replaced and can be funded by SFCC. So as you come over, you see that in that column, if I replace the interior doors, there's a major action, which is replacement cost, and then there is the replacement doors, and then there is an action over here that matches that for the funding. Those numbers don't always agree because the replacement cost and then the actual repair cost may be much less, so you end up with 2 different columns. And you go down all the way down to the bottom, for instance here, these are the MEP items that you see: plumbing, fixtures, water closets, no good, fixtures were available, fixtures to be replaced at the next renovation. So all that's detailed for you all to look at, so you can kind of see where this comes from. We take all this into account when we start doing our numbers and putting it into your DFP as a draft. Normally, as Tim's seen, I go through the DFP and talk about everything. Tim had all that built into a slide, so I don't have to go through that part of the process tonight, but I want to tell you where we're at. When you come down to the end of this, the replacement value is $1.5 million need. Okay? That totals up those numbers. Here's the thing, no one can tell me where these numbers come from. If we do a BG1, that number will probably not be 1.5. And you say, well, why not? That's what they say it will cost. They are trying to equalize the cost across the state and sort of say, if you've got a project in eastern Kentucky up near Ashland where it's a strong union market, and you got a project in another end of the state where there's not a strong union market, and the cost of doing business there are different, the construction costs, they're not acknowledging that. So they're trying to wipe it sort of even playing field all the way across the state. So that's why quite often when I come back, you know, the board hears, oh, on the DFP, it's going to cost $1.5 million to address all these items. And I walk in with a local cost numbers from local contractors. They say, well, wait a minute. That's why it's important on your BG1s to use this number as a starting point, but then you need to look at that in detail and get current recent numbers for this area. Because they've taken, in the old days, they let us do those numbers. They've taken that out of our hands and given it into this program.
I see the stuff that KDE would have would be so antiquated. I mean, bidding climates change constantly. That's crazy.
Yeah. But what is also interesting here, when you see these numbers, we had $1.5 million in this column for replacement value, but they're saying that we can repair that for $870,000. So when we go to KDE on our DFP, and I had a conversation with James Bauman today at KDE, who's very, very good at what he does. I said, James, I said, there's two columns here. Every time I explain this to a district, I don't have an answer for them. Which one are you looking at? He said, I always look at the lowest replacement value. Or what I want to do is get your need up, and I want to go with the 1.5. So I say all of this, and normally I wouldn't say this, but it was so stressed earlier that you had $73 million in need. We don't know what that's going to come out for multiple reasons when we do your final DFP. So don't focus on the numbers right now, because I've seen it change based upon the current K-fix. Ultimately, KDE always cuts you off on a renovation at that 80% number. If it costs more than 80% of the replacement value, they're going to say, no, you got to build new. They're going to stop you. So you want your renovations, because you don't want to build necessarily new schools everywhere. You're going to have that at a maxed out, because that's all they're going to fund through SFCC is the 80%. It may cost more than that. So it's a little bit tricky, and I didn't mean to get people confused, but I think it's important for you to understand that 73 number may change because of the funding and the way that K-Fix is looking at it now, based upon the way they were looking at it when that was done. And the second thing that Tim touched on was the fact about your use of your classrooms principles. Used to, we went in, and if you called it a classroom, we counted it as a classroom. If you were using it as a resource room, we said it was a resource room, and we went on. Now they're saying if it's a full-size classroom, and they don't care how you're using it, we have to count it as a classroom. So it makes it more difficult to show that you have need, because they're trying to balance out what the capacity is versus what the needs are. So some of your needs may change in your DFP, and you'll see that when I go through a summary here shortly, strictly because you may be using your facility in a manner that it originally wasn't intended.
So it sounds like the unmet need's going to go down.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Bottom line, it could go down. Now, I have seen it go up in other districts. We won't know until we get into the meat of it, because I don't know what they had in that previous plan and how they came about to their need. So that being said, there are these sheets, when you get these, and I'm not going to go through every one of them. I got a summary sheet, makes it a whole lot easier for us to understand and everybody else to understand. You can see those numbers. So what we've done is we've come back and we've created, sometimes the old ways are the best ways. To make this clear for everybody, we just put a building summary sheet together, and you'll have these. Makes it a lot easier. So when we look at this now, based upon your current capacity, existing facility capacity that we've calculated based upon the visits throughout the building, counting the classrooms, we got 325 students, and the current enrollment's 245. So all those numbers that Tim's gone through will change based upon this, and then when KD gets a hold of it, they'll probably do a little bit of their own adjusting. Excuse me?
I was asking if we were in city sewer there, and we are. Just wondering.
So we're good on the structural foundations and so forth. I always just kind of focus on the poor windows, the age of the facility. The windows are kind of getting older there, need to be addressed. Doors and hardware, they're fair. Floor coverings and some of the older portions of Crab Orchard need to be addressed. We've got ceilings. There were some bad ceilings in there. Technology's good. We've got Fixed equipment, the age of the building, it's just getting older, and it's been through a lot of additions, but it's still yet, those additions occurred many years ago, and they've seen their fair share of wear and tear. Plumbing's fair, and I would have to go back and look at the specifics of that, but there are some issues there. And Darren, when you look through these 4-year summaries, we need to make sure that the engineers picked up correctly those items.
He just noticed sewer because it's city sewer, I'm like, well.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And there must have been something they went through
Yeah, I
and said,
don't know.
it could be, you're on the city sewer, but it could be that there are clogs happening, there's
Yeah,
blockages on clay tile. So it's not just that it's the city sewer or the
There's all of that.
local package. Yeah, yeah.
There's clay tile for sure.
Now, here's what's interesting. Areas under the space requirements for a 325 student capacity school, that capacity. Right now, you're eligible for a 1,000 square foot library addition and a 400 square foot kitchen addition. Now, I don't have in front of me, for comparison, I'm kind of curious. I'm just gonna pull this up here. If we look at Crab Orchard before, only had a renovation addition, only had a new roof. That's all it had at Crab Orchard. So we are picking up some more needs now that weren't picked up in the original DFP previously. Does that make sense? We got some additions in there, talks about that. The structure's good. There were no major issues. The brick's good. The mechanical system, they were replaced in 2011, the renovation of the building. Everything seems to be fairly well, but they're starting to show wear and tear over the next 10 years and should be replaced. So if you were to do a major renovation there, which really doesn't call for it necessarily, yeah, you've got some needs, but you could start looking at some of these other things at that point. Plumbing systems are much older. The mechanical systems should be focus of the next renovation. No significant plumbing issues were noted during the audit, but efforts should be made to upgrade the plumbing system. So it's upgrading the older plumbing in the older sections of schools. That's what he was looking at. All right, any questions there? Houstonville Elementary, again, current enrollment's 278, you're at 350. Again, this goes back to, you're pretty close there on some of these numbers between the districts, or between the schools. 1963, 81, 1999, and square footage, normal there, good. Roofing needs to be re-roofed, windows are poor, doors and hardware, floor coverings, ceilings. This building has a lot of different things there that are in poor to fair different conditions. And then we go down into the space requirements. This one is 2 existing classrooms, convert 2 existing classrooms into 4 resource rooms and 700 square foot a kitchen addition. So what they're seeing there is there's enough space within that building to take the existing classrooms and renovate those as opposed to doing a addition for resource rooms. So what that'll do is those 2 classrooms, when they go away, will reduce the capacity of the facility because now they become resource rooms. So it gets it closer to that dollar there.
Kevin, the enrollment now, does that include the redistribution of McKinney's numbers?
Yes.
So that's accurate numbers?
Okay. 1963, a renovation in 81, and 1999. Current enrollment, 270. There's some cracks in some of the foundations of the older building. Doesn't mean the building's falling. It's just something we observed, and we would be able to do some work on that. Bricks, good condition. We're seeing exterior windows, original of the building. About 50% are single pane windows. Again, that affects energy. So if you've got a project that could come up as part of an energy savings project or something like that, you'd want to go ahead and get those windows replaced in that as well. Front windows appear to be newer, we know that. Exterior doors in decent condition. There are some exceeded replacement time frame, so we could replace some doors if you wanted to replace doors. Casework marker boards, again, some of those have been replaced, but there's also probably some wear and tear there. Interior doors are original to the addition and need to be replaced. Flooring throughout the original building appeared to be replaced at some point in the 90s. Ceiling tile, 2x4 tile, sewing signs, sagging in the corners. We see that all the time. That would go along with an HVAC renovation, replace the ceilings, the lights, that sort of thing. No significant plumbing issues. but there are some domestic water entrance to the school, near connection with a backflow preventer. I guess we don't have a backflow preventer at that school. Sprinkle the school, that's one that always comes up. Right now, when the school was built, it wouldn't have to be sprinkled. KD recommends it. Most districts want to at some point. It does give you an insurance savings, but a lot of people don't. No issues other than that at this point. Any questions about Houstonville? So as you go through this, if we've missed something, what I challenge you to do is to mark it up, get it to Darren, so Darren can get that in here and we can get it updated. We do miss things from time to time. Buildings are big, and we may not know that that toilet hasn't flushed for 6 years. I stood in a bathroom the other day with a superintendent and her finance director, and for 20 minutes I watched them flush toilet paper down because they told me their toilet wasn't working, and for 20 minutes it did work. I walked out, turned around to leave, and they said, whoa, 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 see, it's not working now. So sometimes things we miss because we just don't see it. It doesn't happen at the same time. Lincoln County Area Technology Center. Again, they don't allow any of the capacities there because it comes within the district itself, but we do look at it. The windows are good. Everything there is in great shape for the most part, so there's not any major issues there. Now, that doesn't mean the board might want to do something to it. They can do things to it and will do things to it. And it may fall down in that discretionary item depending upon what those things are. So we all have to look at that as well. I won't spend a lot of time on it. The next one is the high school. 1,089, 974 is the capacity. I mean, this is seems to be the biggest need as far as capacity versus that. But again, we look at that, and there are some things here, some floor coverings, cracked ceilings. We also had some structural concerns in that one part over there, and I'm surprised that that didn't get picked up. So I'm going to make a note to myself on that one, because he must not have noticed the cracking that we've been watching for a while. We can do a 400 square foot additional space for the art room, 1,000 square foot for the library, 1,000 square foot for the cafeteria, and an 875 square foot addition to the kitchen. Now, what bothers me about that is with that 974 capacity and an enrollment of 1089, you could justify doing those classrooms. So, if that's something that came up. So I'm going to put that in there as well.
Does it take into account the number of kids who are going to vocational school? 'Cause they're not always
Typically,
in
they
classroom.
don't.
Okay.
Typically, they don't, because a lot of times the vocational schools are totally independent. So he just looks at just that. Now, if he's counted those individual classrooms inside of that building or not, I will confirm.
Okay.
Okay? Let's see, mechanical systems, we're almost all replaced in 2000 renovation. There's an RTU above the gym lobby. It seems to be original to the building. We may want to look at that. But if they're working, that's fine. There were really no issues really reported. Light fixtures should be upgraded to LED, and that would happen at any time that you wanted to. Because that, right now, that's the biggest savings for energy that you can do in a building, is switching to LED. Used to, we have to, for our net zero buildings that we build, we used to have to really struggle to get enough savings on the electrical side to make them net zero. Now it's so much easier to be net zero with LED lights. We get a ton of savings off that. Also, the alarm system needs voice activation, evacuation. Highland Elementary School, 233 enrollment, 289 capacity. Foundations are fair, structural fair, roofing, windows, there's a lot of need here. Doors, hardware, ceilings, fixed equipment, general finishes are typically always fair. Technology, but we look at mechanical, electricals, good. The bones, exterior walls, the bones are good. It just needs a lot, it's got a lot of need in that building. And then as we go down this list, we look at the capacity of the school, 1,200 square foot kitchen addition, 400 square foot library addition, 300 square foot resource area, one special ed contained classroom, 825, and then a custodial receiving. Foundations appear to be in good condition, some cracked masonry in areas, but that's probably just minor settlement or expansion and contraction. The building's not falling down, so don't panic when you see these things. We tend to put things in our words and people, their words. If your house had a crack in it, you'd be terrified. The roof appears to be replaced, so there's really no issues there. Walls are dated, paint's chipping in places, a lot of cosmetics. Bleacher, original to the building, but fairly good, but they do not meet ADA. So when you get into these buildings, one of the considerations is the ADA accessibility, and we'll put that down as a need if that's something you all want to address in the next bienniums, the 2 bienniums. We can put those things into there. VCT, vinyl tile lasts forever, but it does eventually break down, and it's in decent condition. But there are 9x9 tiles, which, you know, that's something you want to work on and can put into the DFP, you know, to replace that and get rid of all the asbestos-containing tile. One thing they've not done a lot of emphasis on, KD is where your hazmat report is for all your other buildings. So we might want to look at that, Darren, and see if we've got any, you know, hazmat, you know, I don't know how the board, how if you're asbestos-free everywhere else, or if we've got piping someplace that the engineers may not have picked up. 2x4 ceiling tiles, discoloration in that. Asphalt roads are in poor condition, a lot of breaking down, you know, from elements of salt, sidewalks, that sort of thing. We're going through that right now in several other districts where there's a lot of just overuse, and over time, things are starting to fall apart on the asphalt and storm and so forth. Plumbing in the gym is due for complete replacement, so we could do a renovation of those restrooms, if that's something you all wanted to do. And the light fixtures, the LED alarm systems. Lincoln County High, that's a duplication, isn't it?
That should be maybe, is that the middle school thing? Yeah.
Yeah, he
construction,
didn't, yep,
yeah,
gotta fix
construction
that.
92, that'd be middle school.
You say that didn't sound right.
That's the middle school building.
$591 is the capacity, you're at 582. Foundations, good structure, good exterior walls, good roof, windows are fair, probably have some sealant, some things like that around the perimeter of the building that's starting to fail, maybe some glazing gaskets popping loose,
Seal it.
and some, it's probably just perimeter sealing. Floor coverings poor, ceiling's critical, we must have some leaks or something that have occurred, or some bad ceilings there that they picked up on. General finish is poor, technology, mechanical, electrical, plumbing's fair, sewer's fair, site's good. We can add a computer classroom, 2 standard classrooms at 750 square feet, and I want to confirm that, because I don't know how he's adding classrooms when his capacity's at that point. Four special ed classrooms, resource rooms, 1875 on the square foot of the cafeteria addition, career tech. So there are, you know, we've had conversations, Darren and I, how much are we gonna change on this DFP from what it was before. Depending upon how we do a draft, that will come back, and I'll have to get that draft prepared and get that to you with all these changes, and see where we're at. So concrete foundations, no indication issues, structural elements, all could be dated, hearing replacement on the time frame in 2 years. That's the administrative interior walls being painted. Consider replacement soon on some of those items. Interior doors, fair condition. For the most part, the flooring appears to be dated. There are some areas worse than other. VCT is certain classrooms cracked. So it's just the normal age from settlement over time. Getting back down into mechanical systems, original to 92, evaporative condenser. Replacing boilers, hydronic pumps, there's a lot of things there that may be working now and really aren't giving you any problems, Darren, but if they're eligible for it, so they put that in there, that's something you could do and replace. Hydronic piping and exhaust system should be monitored, because they're also nearing the end of life. Plumbing seems to be fair condition. So there's a lot of needs, but we don't have the money to do a lot of things either. Any questions about that one? he's got it right there. McGuffey, the sixth grade center, 2006, 550, 287. Everything seems to be in pretty good shape on this one, and there's really no additions to do to it. So, you know, that's probably the best building you got right there, but of course it's being under capacity, so.
Yes, it does build.
Yep. Exterior doors are insulated hollow metal frames, excellent condition. He just goes through the whole abbreviation of this. He does say there are some wear and tear, the heat pumps are starting to show wear and tear over the next 5 years. Just replace as necessary. So that's the long-term planning that as you go along, you probably have more, you've got more pressing needs, but some to keep an eye on. And then Stanford Elementary. 520 and 600 on the capacity, and things aren't too bad at Stanford Elementary. I mean, it's held up well, and things are in good shape there. You just had a major addition to it with a Head Start Early Learning Center, and that's doing well. Just the same types of things, really no issues there, just monitor things, and as things get older, start replacing on the older building, original building. Waynesburg, 295, 241. Doors and hardware, we see that. Roofing, of course, general finishes, electrical, seems to be good, and the other items there are in decent shape. And that's got potential additions for kitchen addition, admin addition, and a custodial receiving. What's that?
I just, the kitchen's brand new, I don't know where you're talking about the kitchen.
Well, I think it's the square footage was off.
It's huge, I mean, that's okay.
But I'll check it. I mean, that's what I need to know.
It's the Taj Mahal kitchen.
Yes.
Okay.
Jeff Ruby's kitchen.
We have other things we need besides the kitchen.
Exactly. I mean, that kitchen's sweet, isn't it, Jake?
Yeah.
I'll even look at that again then. I appreciate you saying that.
I'm
He
gonna
may
give
have
it
missed,
a
I mean, a
four,
typo
but-
there.
Be a good place to have a classroom in a kitchen.
Yeah, you can come look at my towel.
616 square foot of admin addition and a custodial receiving square footage is a little low there. Let's see if there's anything specifically noted about that kitchen. No. Hardware, casework. Okay. And that is the last one. So if you'll take these, look at these, in the meantime, what we're gonna be doing, Tim likes us to really try to accelerate and create a draft real quick, but I know there's enough difference here that we need to compare what you've got here to what K-Fix is gonna say, and we'll get back together and we'll bring you a draft at the next meeting.
We do own another property we call the Somerset Building. We're currently not using it for anything. Does it need to be a part of this? Because there may be some talk in the future, maybe we may not need that property, we could sell it.
What's it being used now?
It was an office building.
No, I can't find it in any of the old.
Katie may not even know you have it. So if you put it on there.
Ain't you remembered on anything? You've been part of all these.
No, I don't think we've ever listed it.
Yeah, I normally, we don't use it if it's not listed as an educational facility. That's
I
why you
didn't
don't
take
see
it
that.
there, because I didn't.
You know, you don't see the bus garage is noted on there. They just wanted, in this point, K-Fix was only looking at facilities used for education. I think in the future they will. The only benefit it would do would be if you did decide you want to use it for something, then we could put it on here as a facility that you have and what the intended use is, and then we could look at it and put it on there if there's anything we need to change on it. But I don't know, we need to talk some more about what you might be thinking.
Well, the one thing that pops into my mind is if the board at some point, I don't know, I might have a conversation with them, if they ever did want to sell it, it would have to be a transition building. So does it need to be part of the facility plan with it mentioned?
Well, it's never been used as an educational facility, it's just a piece of property. You've got districts sell their pieces of property without having to have it on the
So
DFT.
is it, like how many square feet is it, what, it just, never had any kids in it?
No, it's always been, it used to be central office years ago. I mean,
Oh.
it was a office building, as long as I can remember. It's probably, we think 3,000 square feet, is it?
Yeah, it's bigger than 2,500.
Yeah, something like that. It's not very big.
I think
I
you
don't-
wouldn't have a bit of problem in doing that.
I
Just-
don't think you need to put it on there.
I've never seen it on anything.
No.
No, if you own the property, all you need to do is contact KDE and say, look, we got a piece of property, we're gonna sell it, you know.
AGE would look good up there, wouldn't
It
it?
would, it would be great.
There you go. At least they're not asking you to donate a football field or something, you know?
We've already asked you that. We've already asked you that.
Put a sign on the football field, yeah.
What's
I
the
like, I like
name of
having
the
you for my
building?
neighbor. I like
We
having
can
you
call
for
it
my
Doug
neighbor.
Hooch, whatever, we
Right
can call it,
there.
even have a building you want
What
to.
you say it's called?
It's the Somerset building,
We just call it Somerset Tree Building.
Somerset
Take
Street.
that name off of it.
Years ago, it was central office. I can't remember that. What was it, Doug, you remember any other use? I mean, seriously, I don't.
That's all I've ever known to be. I don't even.
So you all have a copy now of the old DFP and the needs that were there, principles. You need to look at that and see if there's anything else programmatically. Because just because it's not on a need here, they still are giving you all the ability to say, hey, we want to change what we're doing within a district. You know, I've had people say, well, we don't have this building, we want to build this building for this need. You don't have the money, I know that, but I just want to make sure you're looking at it from the perspective of what else do you need, what else could you do, any restructuring. I've got a district now that's wanting to go in and tear walls out between classrooms. And it's not on their DFP to do it, they'll have to do a finding, but it makes sense with what they're trying to do with COVID and reduce student counts.
And that's what I was sitting here thinking, is that we are under capacity, severely under capacity in some of these elementary schools. So we also see a projection of our population going down,
That's right.
and I guess one alternative would be to think about building a large, modern elementary somewhere and eliminating 2 or 3, but that's not very favorable for communities and the parents who drive kids to school and stuff. So what he just said, if we start to reimagine the classroom maybe, we've got plenty of capacity, so restructure how we have the school and rework inside the walls instead of, obviously HVAC systems are important, but start to think about and ask the teachers, what can we do in this skeleton to make this better? Because we've got plenty of room, it sounds like. And I think that that's what we ought to really focus on, is for a future plan, is what can we do to make this thing function better now that we've got this extra space? Do we create an additional room that teachers visit with special kids at times? If we've got, I hear kids that, teachers are having trouble because we have kids that are distracting to all the other kids or something. Maybe we create rooms that teachers can take those kids to and work with and try to reach that are away from the other kids or something. So I think we could really benefit by just what he just said, restructuring how the school's classified, how the room's classified maybe, and avoid the state saying, you don't need that school.
Well, that's a good point, and I think it's a valid point. The problem is KDE is not going to allow you to do that because you would have to do it on your own without them knowing, but they're always going to look at it as a facility that's for that original capacity, even when you make those changes. Now, what you're talking about is some of the things we're seeing with 21st century education facilities, because we're doing some new buildings right now, and what you said is exactly right. Where they used to have one FMD room, now they've got EBD. There's another one called sensory, SBD or something like that. So there are all these new rooms. So I'm doing a new elementary school for 400 students, 400 to 500 students, and I've got 3 FMD rooms. Now, we didn't design them as, we called them classrooms and just happen to have toilets, but we can't even put those new programs into place because KD doesn't acknowledge them as programs. And I think another thing we're seeing an increase in is day treatment centers. We're having a lot of districts, or now, I've got a district right now that KD's saying, you've got the money, you've got the building, you need to add on to it to make it function truly for 75 to 100 kids for a true day treatment center. We weren't letting you do it because we don't have a program that says it works, other than an alternative school. So we've had to develop a program, convince KDE, because it's not an alternative school. So what you're saying is true, you got to think about those things, but it's a real challenge to put it into a DFP, because they're always going to see that building as being that capacity. When you start tearing walls out, I don't know how you spend money on that and KDE approve it, because they're gonna say, well, you got the space you need, we're not gonna let you tear it. It would be a challenge, and I'm willing to face that challenge if that's where you wanna go. But I think it's one of those things that, you're right, there's gotta be some other creative thoughts for these districts that are, keep going down, and they don't wanna lose their little schools. I've got a district right now that finally, after years, they finally shut down their 102 students' school, and it was a bear. But they just had to, they just could not afford to keep it. They wouldn't do about a bill, they had to do it. It's a challenge.
I guess I would chime in too to say, on paper, it says Houstonville has this space, but being a teacher in that building and thinking about some of the teacher rooms, we're going outside for art right now to a trailer building. Music, thankfully, I think has moved inside now. And I think about like one of our special education teachers' rooms, it's a teeny tiny place. So on paper, it may appear that there's that space, but in being in there, it's just really not there.
There's no empty rooms.
And it just depends on, every school uses their space different too.
That's
I
right.
mean, and that, of course, on paper, I mean, I'm agreeing with you 1,000%.
Now,
You know, I'm thinking about Stafford, you know, there's some rooms there that's really, were originally a classroom, but they're not, but there's spaces, you know what I mean, but I'm agreeing, but, you know, there's, like Kevin said, the way things are changing with education, you know, there might be time to look at some of these things, how we use our space, and just like Doug was saying, we might be able to do some things and
That's right.
modernize it and use our space better, I guess, more wisely.
Well, yeah, who's to say we can't challenge what they're saying about?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. and-
That's
I think
exactly
we
right.
should challenge the
Right.
state. Happy with that.
Kevin, does your report have how many schools we have trailers being used? On there, I didn't see
No.
anything on there.
No.
Shouldn't we list that?
Yes, because they'll want you to get rid of the modulars.
How many do we have? How many schools do we have now?
Houstonville, Highland, y'all help me.
Everywhere.
We don't know.
Houstonville, Highland.
Just Houston and Highland?
Are they counting as part of our capacity?
No, shouldn't be.
Houstonville, you know, has quite, you know, the most. Highland has the rest of them.
Well,
They're actually permanent structured, but they're outside buildings.
So are they gonna make us get rid
I
of
thought it was
them, or
mandated
somebody
to
suggest?
get rid
They
of
would
it.
highly suggest, they're not gonna make you get rid of them.
Okay.
What we wanna do though is we wanna show it as a need. If you've got 3 classrooms in Houstonville, and if this capacity is based off of not those units, then, you know, you're saying, the schools are really being used fully. And I've never seen a school that's under capacity not being used fully. I mean, people grow. And what I found in one district, for that same reason, they wanted to renovate, and I went back in and I said, well, wait a minute. So you need all these extra spaces, and you've got all these extra classrooms, why are we adding all the extra classrooms? Well, we use those. Well, the reality was, the principal finally confessed to the superintendent that the reality was they were used for 1 hour a day, and nobody wanted to move their stuff. They weren't sharing rooms that were not, and it was really, really a difficult discussion. At the end of the day, they're gonna build a new school anyway. But that was due to structural reasons, the building was gonna cave in. But, you know, it's a difficult solution to the way you all as teachers and staff need to use a building, and the separation, Katie just doesn't see it the same way. They really don't, it's a battle.
The only way they'll approve a modular unit is if you're way over capacity and have to.
They won't let you put new ones in, but they want you to tear them out, and if I can get the capacity.
Fayette County,
I've seen them in Fayette.
they've got them everywhere because they can't build
I was
schools.
gonna say, they
fast
can't build
enough.
fast enough to pay.
Yeah.
But I think it's embarrassing we're still using trailers.
Yeah.
Well, if they're not on there, they need to be on there, and I'll double check and make sure how that affects your capacity. I don't think they would have walked through the modulars and considered them, because we're not allowed to consider them, so I think capacity is what it is. I just don't know what that does to you if you can add on, if your capacity doesn't justify it, so I'll have to get.
They're not counting all those capacities. So.
I don't think so.
No, they're not.
There's no way.
Does the capacity at Stanford include the early Head Start and preschool? In this, there's a different number in this document versus what you shared up there, by about
That
250.
document's wrong.
That, yeah.
225, this document's
It'll
wrong?
be wrong.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah,
because that's,
it's the state's, a lot of that is not accurate. This
So how are we
deal-
showing way under capacity at schools that we've got trailers? I don't understand that.
That's what I'm saying, it's the use of the space, If you're using that space, it's a standard classroom, and you're using it for something else, you've subdivided into 2 resource rooms, because it originally was and is supposed to be a standard classroom, we're counting as a standard classroom. But you may have other programs that are moving into that space, occupying that space, using that space, that you're full up, and I get it. You know, I do, but I can't count it that way.
Yeah.
I
I'd
mean,
like,
they're saying 60% capacity at Houstonville, they don't have an empty room there.
yeah, I'd like the representatives from those schools to actually,
The last capacity I saw for the building was 439, I think that was our last one. And I don't, but I know, talking to teachers, there's no room.
And I know every room is used. Now, I don't know what some of them are used for, I guess, but I know that the trailers, we have, one trailer is ED, we have one trailer is our art, and then we have one trailer that is, like our resource center, our RTI building. The other one, I'm not exactly sure, you remember what that one was?
What
Music
I'm,
was out there and it came
Well, and it
in.
came in, but now that's what the ED is now.
Oh, okay.
Music came into a
And
classroom, so we
21st
have music
century.
in a standard
Family
classroom.
century.
That's one of them. And
Yeah,
she's
I know about that one.
speaking.
Family resource.
Yeah.
I heard about that one, Darren.
what I wanna do, what I would like to do, if it's, we got all principals in here?
Maybe, we'll get more than 2.
What I'm going to do is I'm gonna have our floor plans sent over to Darren. And Darren, if you could, distribute that to each principal. I would like to get the principals to walk through and tell us what they're using every single room for to confirm the numbers. Because I think I need to be able to show you all that your capacity is accurately calculated, number one. And number two, I wanna make sure that we've got everything accounted for with regards to these modular units.
Yeah, I doubt we have any principals like making up rooms, you know, it's,
No.
if they're full, they're full.
Yeah, well, but I think,
But it needs to be justified.
There you go.
And validated, so.
Sometimes you'll have a classroom that you may have 4 therapists in.
yes,
Speech
We have
therapists.
one classroom that
I
has
have one.
two.
Or you may have it used as a
They'll
teacher's lounge.
they'll have a divider in there, you know, maybe
Mhm.
just a partial wall or something, they'll be in there.
That's where it gets skewed.
and that's exactly it. These specialized programs, when my guys walk through, when our teams walk through, they see that as a classroom because that's what we've been instructed to call it.
It's just space, classroom
You know,
space.
it is a classroom space, therefore your capacity is impacted.
I'd like that validated, because just based on occupancy, it looks unfavorable to us from a KD standpoint.
Yeah,
Well, it's good to do it. We didn't do it 4 years ago. We've done that before. I remember as a principal doing that, and it's good to see that, and then you can put, you know, you know exactly what that is.
the reason why I want that is I know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But the reality is what you're using it for, I can't call it that for the sake of the SFCC and the building program.
If it's classroom space, there's one kid, then it doesn't matter.
I've
There could be
seen
30 kids in
classrooms
it.
used for storage
Yeah,
Yeah.
in buildings that have, they kinda lost capacity and they kinda just use them for whatever. So, it's probably a good idea to look at them.
It's just like my basement, you know, if whatever space I got, I'm gonna use, it don't make any difference, you know, it's full of stuff. But it's the same way, I was the same way at school, you use all your space.
And sometimes family resource is inside a classroom within a building. Sometimes that's,
Most of our schools, it is. Except for
sometimes
one.
that's the case too,
Well,
so,
and that kind of goes back to what I said, that you're using it for
Right,
a need,
right.
yeah.
instead of just letting it be an empty room. So you are kind of doing what I said, it still hurts us on capacity
It does.
versus need, but at least we're using it. Yeah,
The space gets used, it's just not,
yeah.
you know.
They look at it very differently up there, and their model program might need to change, but
it does, it really does.
Absolutely.
They've not
I know
revised
with
it.
times
I agree
it
with
hasn't
that
changed for
110%.
several years, but you can't convince them of that.
I know a district right now that built a brand new high school, and they're doing a renovation to tear out walls in their new high school that hasn't been up very long. And I don't know how, I guess they're spending general fund money on it, because I don't know how they're doing it. But they're tearing walls out and building, you know, discovery zones, like decentralized media centers in between the classrooms and things. And I'm thinking, you know, that was just built. How does that get through KD with a program? And then I've got other districts that want to do it and can't get it through. You know, it's just, it's crazy.
Maybe Bill Gates lives in that community.
Maybe so. Anything else you see that you want us to take a look at? Anybody online got anything to add?
Anybody online got anything they wanna add?
We're all eating dinner.
Honestly, this will be one of the longer meetings you'll ever have, so don't think it'll be longer next time. We're a little bit behind on our timeline, so we kind of squeeze two into one here, so, but the next meeting, whenever that may be, and we'll have to let you know as to when, we're ready to bring in a draft to be discussed, so. And for that meeting, purpose, Ms. Benson, we won't need a public forum. It'll be a regular meeting, and you can call that 24 hours in advance. You don't have to do an ad, so just like a board meeting.
Oh, excellent.
No ad, just have to do like you call a special call board meeting.
I
So,
hope to give you guys more than 24 hours notice.
yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the legal part of it, but, and advertisement's not, you don't have to. So this will be a regular LPC meeting. We'll have the forum after they vote on a plan someday, okay? So I don't think we can tell you right now when.
No, I need to go back and do some
He-
work.
It's, he's got some work to do, and
And we'll go back and start creating a draft based upon the LPC and the K-Fix, based upon,
we'll be working on that
K-Fix
date,
meeting.
though, and get it out to you and, move on.
Well, I do like, that's the first time I saw the KP, I mean, how it comes out.
It's much better.
Yeah, it's much better than the old way. I hate to brag on
well, it's an interesting program. It's just, it's been a bear
it.
to
It's
keep
more
up.
realistic, put it that way.
Yeah, and what they're gonna do is that I think it will generate you a draft DFP eventually. I think that's where they're headed. With all this integration, it'll generate you a draft DFP, and you'll present it to the LPC and say, here's what we got coming up in the next 4 years. And, you know, you'll go from that, and then everybody will be saying, yep, you know, and you'll prioritize where does it go, you know, it'll be that simple.
With that, anybody got anything else? I think we're done, right, Tim? Got anything else?
I just wanted to say thank you all once
Appreciate
again
it.
for willing to serve on this, and sorry it's a longer meeting than that.
Do you want to do a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Missy made one right there, I think, didn't Missy made one? Julia seconded, I see her over there. Anybody opposed to that?
I don't think you, I don't care.
Andy, okay with that?